Hi, Arcfieldweather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday morning, November the 21st. A lot to talk about this morning. Our significant storm system in the northeastern part of the nation is underway. We still have a long way to go, though. Going to be quite an interesting next 36 to 48 hours or so with significant snow in some of the higher elevation locations of those Appalachian Mountains, from the Poconos to the Catskills, for example, southwestern PA, Laurel Highlands, down across West Virginia. The mountainous areas of West Virginia look to get some significant snowfall as well. And I do believe there'll be snow seen for the first time this year all the way down into the I-95 corridor region on Friday, maybe even a period of all snow in places like the northern western suburbs of Philadelphia, even down across the northern and western suburbs of Baltimore and Washington, D.C. as well. Even some small grassy accumulations on Friday in some of those suburbs of the big cities along I-95. Before we focus in on the short term, the next 48 hours or so, kind of want to jump ahead a little bit to the latter part of next week, going into the first full week of December. And indeed, the overall weather pattern does look quite cold, quite wintry, going into the month of December. This is a forecast map by the ensemble run of the GFS for the average temperature anomalies over a 7-day period, extending from about Thanksgiving Day, next Thursday, to about the 5th of December. And this is a very impressive, widespread, colder than normal pattern here for a 7-day period to show up some areas way below normal, some 20 degrees below normal, averaged out for that 7-day period. Again, this 7-day period ends on December 5th, begins around Thanksgiving, which is a week from right now. Very impressive on the GFS ensemble run. Now, let's take a look at the European ensemble run. And here we go, very similar to the GFS ensemble run. So a lot of supporting evidence between the two models here for this 7-day period. Again, this extends from around Thanksgiving to December 5th. A lot of the country, almost all of the country, below normal, with well below normal temperatures up across the northern plains, the interior part of the northwest, and that extends all the way out into the southwestern part of Canada. So indeed, quite a wintry-like pattern here as we move into the month of December. Now, one last map I want to show with respect to the longer range here, again, later next week, going into the first full week of December. This is the same kind of a map from the European ensemble run of 500 millibar height anomalies, averaged again over that 7-day period between Christmas and December 5th. And this is a wintry-looking upper-level pattern here. That's what I want to point out here. First of all, I always like to see blocking over northeastern Canada and Greenland. This is higher pressures than normal, higher heights than normal in this part of North America. You want to see that if you favor the idea of colder than normal weather in the central and eastern states. You also have a trough sitting right over the Great Lakes, the northeast U.S. And let's clear the page here and notice the pattern here showing a wind flow right down like this, bringing some very, very cold Canadian air from way up there in northern Canada, maybe even some cross-polar flow here, all the way down into southern Canada, then ultimately into the northern U.S., contributed to by an upper-level ridge sitting here over Alaska. And again, that sets up this kind of a flow right out of northwestern Canada into the northern U.S. And this supports that prior couple of maps that we just looked at with colder than normal weather across much of the nation going into the month of December. Well, now let's focus in on the near term here over the northeastern part of the nation. This is a look at the latest radar loop, and we did have a pretty significant band of rain that came through the I-95 corridor region late last night, really from the hours of about 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. There was this band of decent rainfall, the best rainfall we've seen in a while in many places along that D.C., Philadelphia, New York City corridor, even some rumbles of thunder and some very impressive wind gusts as well. That is all sliding to the north and east. And in a normal situation, without intense high pressure blocking pattern to the north, this might continue to move to the north and east. But in this case, and we'll see some of the forecast maps in a moment, this will actually rotate around what we call retrograde back to the south and west over the next 12 to 24 hours or so as surface low intensifies over the northern mid-Atlantic coastline, and then it is forced to rotate around again due to that extreme high-level, high-latitude blocking pattern over northeastern Canada and Greenland. This activity is associated with that upper-level low that also is playing a big role here in sliding to the south and east. It deepens as it moves to a position right over the Mid-Atlantic region by later on this evening into the overnight hours. So we're not quite done with this precipitation yet. A lot of this actually rotates around to the south and west later on tonight and during the day on Friday. Well, let's take a look here at the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast maps from last night's zero-Z run of the GFS, and we've talked at length about that high latitude blocking here represented on these particular maps in orange with above normal heights, above normal pressure, and that is forcing this whole system to kind of rotate around the northeastern states for the next 48 hours or so. We can see the center of the upper level feature right now over the central Great Lakes, and watch what happens. It kind of moves to the south and east and intensifies, becomes a powerhouse upper level low sitting right on top of the Mid-Atlantic region later on tonight going into early Friday. And again, it's forced to rotate around because of this high latitude blocking over northeastern Canada. In fact, we'll see a rotation around. See that rotating around here, and this is taking us all the way into Saturday morning, 48 hours from now, still sitting there not far from the Mid-Atlantic, but right off the Mid-Atlantic coastline by Saturday morning again, all due to that intense high pressure up to the north, the fact that it will force it to rotate around, and that extends, of course, the period of precipitation and strong winds in the Mid-Atlantic region, in the northeast U.S., through tonight, through Friday night, and finally starting to wind down over the early part of the upcoming weekend. Now, let's take a look at the surface maps, and I want to kind of focus in on some of the changes that I expect to see over the next 12, 24, 36 hours or so. Again, this whole system rotates around, and we'll see that on these particular forecast maps here due to that high latitude blocking. But I wanted to first focus in on these dashed blue lines here. These are what we call thickness lines, and they represent the thickness of that lower half of the atmosphere from the surface to up to 500 millibars. And 500 millibars represents the middle part of the atmosphere. Basically, there's a good correlation between the thickness and temperature. The lower the thickness values, the more contracted that mass of air in that lower half of the atmosphere, and the colder the temperatures. The higher the thickness, the warmer the temperatures. So when you see lower and lower thickness values, you can see right here, this kind of represents the core of the cold air in the upper part of the atmosphere, this 522 thickness. Now, notice this 540 thickness right here. That's kind of an important thickness value that we forecasters use during the winter season to kind of determine or give us a rough estimate of the rain-snow line of this time of the year. Notice we're 540, even a little bit above 540 thickness here in the DC, Philadelphia, even into northeastern PA. But watch what happens over the next 12, 24 hours or so with respect, just to focus in on these thickness lines right now. Notice they start to drop. In other words, it starts to turn colder in the upper part of the atmosphere. This is the forecast map for 7 o'clock this evening. We were, about 545 thickness, let's say, in Philadelphia, starting the day here on Thursday, and we're dropping throughout the day, and that's indicative of that colder air moving in overhead here. You see this 528 thickness now encompassing much of that DC, Philadelphia, even up to New York City area. In other words, colder and colder air is moving in aloft over the next several hours, and that is why some of these rain showers will turn to snow showers. And by the way, there can be ice pellets mixed in during that transition period. Don't be surprised to see ice or grapple or snow pellets, something of that nature. And here we are now around midnight or so, and you can see some dark blues here. Now here's that surface low that starts off here this morning and then rotates around. The upper level low kind of helps to draw it in and wraps it around here. We get this wraparound precipitation, and it dives to the south and west, and very much cooler air in the upper part of the atmosphere. Again, we're looking at maybe 528 thickness as compared to 545, 546 beginning the day here this morning. That's why where there may be rain showers today, will be snow by tomorrow. And I do expect, even into the suburbs of the I-95 corridor region, to see some snow tomorrow. Even perhaps down to the D.C. northern western suburbs, there can be some snow. Small grassy accumulations possible in the I-95 suburban areas north and west of the big cities. And this then just rotates around, and here's that surface low here by tomorrow evening down over southeastern PA. And when the upward motion kind of relaxes, any kind of frozen precipitation could change back to rain later in the day tomorrow, and then that finally starts to scoot on out of here by Saturday morning. But we'll still have strong winds on Saturday on the backside of the departing low pressure out of the northwest. There's still an impact, and still some precipitation in the form of rain or snow up across New England as we begin the day on Saturday. Now, let's take a look at a snowfall forecast map. Well, here's the forecast map for the upcoming storm by last night's 0Z run of the GFS. Generally tend to agree with the sentiment here. The sentiment here is that there can be significant snow up across the highlands, the higher elevation locations of northeastern PA, all the way into upstate New York. We're talking about places like the Poconos to the Catskills, and especially along the PA New York border regions. 6 to 12 inches possible in many of these areas. In some of the highest elevation locations, a foot or more likely from this system here. We can see snow accumulating as early as this afternoon in this part of the mid-Atlantic region. By the way, there's a second area of significant snowfall likely, and that extends from the Laurel Highlands of southwestern PA throughout the central and eastern part of West Virginia. So these are, in fact, some of the prime areas here, I believe, for significant snow out of this system. Now, by significant, I mean anything 6 inches or above. And again, some of those highest elevation areas can easily exceed a foot and a half maybe. And this will be of the heavy wet snow variety, which is not good news. That could bring down some trees in some of these high elevation locations. Borderline temperatures translates to heavy wet snow. By the way, there can be some small grassy accumulation, certainly, especially in the suburbs of the big cities here, all the way, let's say, all the way up to the New York City northern western suburbs, Philly northern western suburbs. This is a possibility. There can be all snow for a while tomorrow in some of those northern and western suburbs. Again, it could change back to rain later in the day, but there can be a period of all snow all the way into the I-95 corridor, suburban locations on Friday. Again, with that colder and colder air moving in aloft. And certainly will be some accumulating snow across the interior of New England during this upcoming storm system. One last note, we saw at the front end of this video discussion a lot of cold air coming for the central and eastern states, much of the nation, in fact, from later next week into the first week of December. There also can be a storm threat to deal with in the Mid-Atlantic region towards the latter part of next week, Thursday, Friday time frame. And, of course, Thursday, it's Thanksgiving Day. We'll focus in on that for sure during next week. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.